What's happening, Reds? It's Jamie Webster here. Just wanted to say, subscribe below. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Liverpool Connection podcast. I am one of your hosts, Daz, and Steve is back in the house today. We've got a double special guests today. They just came out with a brand new book called Red on Red, Liverpool, Manchester United, and the fiercest rivalry in world football, and still is. I believe, a lot of people might say Barca and Madrid, but no chance. It's Liverpool, Man United. But anyways, BBC Sports chief sports football writer, Phil McNulty is here, and award-winning broadcaster, writer and author is Jim White. Welcome to the Liverpool Connection.
Hi.
Thanks for having us.
Who wants to delve in first, Steve? Because I know how you like to ask how they became like authors and everything. So if you want to kick it off, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, usually we start the episode by going, "Hey, how did you fall in love with Liverpool? And what was your first game?" But we know that's not the case for this episode. So let's dive into the book. I've already pre-ordered, but I don't know how I'm going to be able to wait until next year to be able to receive it. And so this podcast will help me get through those long days. Like, when is this book going to come out? So if you guys want to just talk about how the genesis of the thought process to come together and talk about this rivalry, like Daza alluded to, there are other rivalries in football, but I don't know many that can compare to the Manchester and Liverpool rivalry over the years. And so how'd the idea of the book come about? And we'll just start from there.
Yeah, well, I can answer this because the idea was not mine and it wasn't Jim's. The idea came from my wife, Lynn, who is a fanatical Liverpool fan. And as I always say, she was born on May the 25th. So she's had two very happy birthdays in 1977 and 2005, particularly. Mm-hmm. And obviously she is sort of steeped in the tradition of Liverpool, followed them all her life, goes to the match. And she just started talking about this rivalry, saying, while it is the football that holds it all together, there's much more to it. There's the two cities, cultural, political, musical, fashion, even a touch of hooliganism. And we interviewed people who were involved in all of that. And I felt that, yes, it's a great idea, but it needed a Mancunian eye, as I've called it, to have a look at it, as well as me doing it from the other angle. Jim is a friend of mine and a neighbour. We live in Oxford, not far from each other. And we got together and had a chat, and we both agreed it was an idea really well worth exploring, sorry. And we found that when we started, who will we interview, who we speak to, everybody without fail was incredibly keen to speak about this rivalry, what it meant to them, players, managers, supporters, politicians. And you could just tell immediately right away there was a real deep rivalry that fired up the emotions, that had lots of history. And it then became a really enjoyable process. As I say, we've interviewed pretty much 50 people for the book. And it was sort of the enthusiasm with which people greeted the idea really meant we could accelerate into it and get into it. And in the end, we really enjoyed writing it. And the feedback we've had so far from people is that they've enjoyed reading it.
One of the things that I love about supporting Liverpool is just the history and how it really correlates with the history of the city, right? And you learn so much. And it's amazing to me just the differences of Manchester and Liverpool and taking in part their proximity to each other. And I'm sure, without having read the book, there has to be a lot of cultural influence that's based into the football rivalry.
It's fascinating, Steve, when we've looked into this, it is a sibling rivalry because these are two cities that are very, very similar in their background, their political ethics, a lot of Irish immigration. And yet when they come together, they absolutely churn against each other. but we think that it's odd. You know, we've claimed this is the fiercest rivalry. It's very different from the rivalry, say, between Celtic and Rangers in Glasgow, which is about sectarianism, religion, politics. It's different from Barcelona, Real Madrid, which is again about politics, nationalism, republicanism, the Spanish Civil War. And it's also different from Tottenham against Arsenal or Aston Villa against Birmingham City, which is much more territorial, local. It's fed in the workplace. It's fed in the school playground. United and Liverpool is different. The thing that drives the animosity between the two cities, and it's there, you know, there is an animosity between the two cities, is football. It's the fact that these are the two grandest football institutions in England, and it's who wants to be in charge, who wants to boast that they own the top dog. And I think that really feeds into everything between the two cities. And interestingly, it's not between Manchester City and Liverpool. It's not between Everton and Manchester United. It's between Liverpool and United, because they are the two biggest clubs in English football, and it's who's the top dog.
You know, it's always funny when people are like, no, it's City and Liverpool are now the new rivalry. I said, no, that's not the new rivalry. Is that, you know, that's a purely different perspective on looking at just one aspect of what a rivalry could be, right? It doesn't encompass all of the cultural and just the historical context of those.
Yeah, we spoke to quite a few people, and that came up quite a lot. What about Liverpool and Manchester City? And everybody, whether they were Liverpool or Manchester United, told us the same story, really. It's that, you know, Liverpool and Manchester City is currently the great footballing rivalry in the Premier League, because they are, by common consent, the two outstanding teams in the Premier League, probably by some distance. And of course, they've had these great title battles that have gone down to the last day, even sort of down to the last 20 minutes, if you like, last season. But it's still not the same. It's a footballing rivalry, but it doesn't go much beyond that. There's no particular history to it. There's none of the great occasions that maybe people can recall. And as yet, none of the great Manchester City are successful recently, but they don't have that rich history of success and rivalry that Liverpool and Manchester United have. And pretty much everybody said, yeah, Manchester City are football rivals, but there just isn't that wider context to the whole story and the history. Again, we've said this quite a few times. People have said to us, while, you know, there is a rivalry, you can't invent the rivalry that Liverpool and Manchester United have, one that's been built up over so many years and has so many strands to it, so many stories. And yeah, as we pointed out, they still haven't gone head to head for the title yet. We interviewed a guy called Robbie O'Neill, who's an actor from Liverpool, and he said if some of the title battles between Liverpool and Manchester City had been between Liverpool and Manchester United, they would have been making films about it. He said it's the modern day equivalent of Ali versus Fraser, was the phrase he used. But the rivalry, Liverpool and Manchester United is the rivalry. Liverpool and Manchester City is not a patch on it. And despite Manchester United's current struggles, I don't see that rivalry being surpassed or altered in its emphasis anytime soon at all.
You know,
what we've discovered. We've discovered, Stephen, in the book is that United and Liverpool are very rarely at the top together. It's a cyclical thing. So in the 70s and 80s, Liverpool were the dominant club. United were playing catch up all the time. In the noughties and the 90s and the noughties, it was the other way around. And now it's gone into reverse. Liverpool are in the ascendant. And yet, when Manchester United were up against Arsenal in the noughties, it was still Liverpool that their fans looked to. It was still Liverpool that was the big game for them. Gary Neville, no friend of Liverpool, said to us that when they were, you know, in United were miles ahead of Liverpool in the 90s, they still looked in the rearview mirror, checking, where are Liverpool? Where are Liverpool? They were the people who mattered. And I suspect that for Liverpool fans now, obviously I can't speak for them, but I suspect for Liverpool fans now, yeah, United are rubbish. Of course they are, but they're still the ones that matter. And actually, on Monday when they play them, it'll be great. They'll have fun. They can gloat. It means it'll mean a lot more to them than playing City. And it's still about who has the most trophies. Mm-hmm. Who has the most league titles, who has the most European Cups. City is still not there yet. Mm-hmm. And in a sense, for neither club are they the ones that matter.
Well, I mean, the Liverpool United match is what you look for first when the schedule comes out. Every single year is what I look for. And I think most Liverpool fans still look for that. And I think United fans are the same. It's still holds so much.
Yeah. We did an event with Pete Hooton at Waterstones in Liverpool the other night about the book, and he was hosting it. We did his podcast beforehand, the one he does for the Liverpool Echo, and he said, we were discussing this, and he said, when the fixture list comes out, when are we playing Manchester United? When are we playing Everton? He said, after that, he said, they look for Manchester City then. How late towards the end of the season is it? He said, but immediately the eyes are drawn to Manchester United and then maybe Everton. But certainly Everton, even before Manchester City, as a game that carries great meaning. Obviously, in the old title story, it's the Manchester City-Liverpool game. And imagine if it was being played 2 weeks before the end of the season and stuff like that. But he said, always Manchester United first, always Everton after that. And then maybe then you would look at Manchester City.
I was going to reference that, over the years, there hasn't, like you said, that there hasn't been any direct, competition for first and second place for the league, but you do have the all the other cups, right? And especially when there was
but even there, Steve, even there, it's odd that the two most decorated clubs in English football have not met that often. Right. It's 2 League Cup finals, 2 FA Cup finals, and in Europe they've somehow managed to avoid it. What is it, Phil? Is it the last 16 in the Europa League?
That's League, and we were saying that there was a spell when quite often 3 out of the last 4 teams in the Champions League were English teams. It was, say, you could pick them, Liverpool, Manchester United, Arsenal and Chelsea. So we're always in that mix in the last 4. To my mind, Liverpool always seem to be playing Chelsea every 5 minutes in the Champions League. They never, ever played Manchester United. They somehow avoided them. And even when we were starting to write the book, we were thinking of a timeline of the games that we could look at. And the first really big one that came to mind for us was the 1977 FA Cup final, which again in itself is unusual, given the dominance of both teams throughout the 60s and the dominance of Liverpool throughout the 70s. Manchester United obviously went into decline for a spell then, but certainly just amazing how they somehow avoided each other. Jim uses a nice phrase where he says that maybe there's just not enough oxygen in the northwest of England for Liverpool and Manchester United to both be successful at the same time. But it is unusual that they've managed to avoid each other and not had, as Steve was saying there, those head-to-head title races that Liverpool have had with Manchester City in recent times.
I would love to see more of that as well, because that's what you want. With City, it's basically the normal thing now is Liverpool City, but I would give anything to have a United Liverpool final. League Cup, FA Cup, Champions League would be great, because we do look at them like we have somewhat knocked them off the perch in the last few years, which is always nice. But again, like Jim said, it comes in cycles. Once Klopp's gone, our United are they going to take over again? I'm sure we'll discuss what's going on with United in a little while.
I was at the game. I've said this a couple of times. I was at the game in 1990. I was covering it for the Liverpool Daily Post when Liverpool beat QPR to clinch the title. And if you'd have stopped Liverpool fans after that game and said to them, you should really enjoy this because it's not going to happen again for 30 years. What would they have said to you, Daz? They would have said, you're mad, wouldn't they? They said, you're absolutely mad. The very notion that wouldn't happen again for 30 years. And yet that's how it panned out. No one could have believed the things that unfolded and the sudden dominance of Manchester United. So it's an old saying, but football is cyclical, and United, in some form, will come back to strength soon. Just because, like Liverpool, they're that type of club that they're built on success. They've got the power, they've got the fan base. But for now, which will delight you two guys, I have no doubt, Liverpool are on and off the pitch, without getting Jim going on the Glazers, although I'm sure he will. They are streets ahead of United, aren't they? In every respect you care to mention.
We've just been talking in England at the moment. It's the actual. I think it was last. I think it may have been yesterday. 30th anniversary of the Premier League. This great packaging device for selling English football around the globe, and the one narrative the Premier League has not had, and the one narrative that they would give their eye teeth commercially to have at their fingertips, is a Manchester United Liverpool head-to-head for the title. And it's never happened. Well, vaguely in 2008 it almost happened, but it didn't quite. And it's just weird that it hasn't happened. Just really weird.
It seems weird.
You think it would.
Yeah. Well, it seems weird to only play United twice a year, because we we seem to play Chelsea and City at least 3-4 times now. So yeah, it'd be great to get that back and have that, twice a year is not good enough for me against United, especially while we're winning. I wish we played them 4 or 5 times, but take what I can get.
Get 12 points off of a season.
Well, I know the league has only just started, and 2 games in, but from a United perspective, Jim, you've got to be not in kind of meltdown mode, but you've got to be what's going on.
Yes, absolutely. I was at the Brentford Manchester United game last Saturday, and I said publicly that was the worst performance I'd ever personally seen United give. Not many people disagreed with me. A couple of people came back with, "Oh, what about when we lost 5-1 to City?" or a couple of other instances. But the level of cluelessness was really alarming. It was fascinating. Brentford are an example of a very well-run, well-coordinated, professional outfit from top to bottom, from chairman to manager and all the levels in between, their recruitment departments and so on. And you would say the same about Liverpool at the moment. The Fenway Park Group are, of course, interested in making money. Let's not pretend that they're some sort of philanthropists. They're capitalists in tooth and claw. But the fact is, they're very efficient at it. They're very good at it. They're very professional. And they brought in excellent people at every level, particularly in the dugout, where Klopp is this impresario manager controlling everything that goes on the park. Whereas Manchester United are a shambles. The Glazers are not just greedy leeches. They're useless greedy leeches. They couldn't run a bath. It's just awful what the level that they have come to now, and the infrastructural lack of investment. I don't know, Daz, when the last time you managed to get to Old Trafford was, but the place is genuinely falling apart. There hasn't been any redevelopment since 2004. Now compare that to everyone else. Liverpool have got the new Anfield Road stand going up. Tottenham have got that magnificent new stadium. Everton are building a new stadium, which Phil and I walked down to the other day on the Docklands, and is going to be magnificent. United, there may be some thought about doing something, and that is what's going on there. And I often think for Liverpool fans, there's a thought of, there, but for the grace of God go we, because if the financial crisis hadn't rid you of Gillette, I think they'd have done the same to Liverpool as the Glazers have done to United.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm definitely for the protests. We discussed it on another podcast the other day. We're with United on that, because no football team should have to go through what basically United are going through. And I know some people will be like, well, who cares about Man United? I do, to be honest, because I want to play them again and again and again. And they've got this rich history just like us. Why would I ever want them getting relegated? I wouldn't, to be honest, because I want to play.
I think the thing about Man United's fans as well, Daz, is that this unrest hasn't suddenly come because they've lost a few games or suddenly the clubs. They were protesting against these people when times were good. They spot it, a bit like Liverpool fans with Hicks and Gillette. There's the initial euphoria, isn't there, when they come, and you think, oh great, these are the guys who are going to revitalise the club. They're going to pump money in. But fans are not stupid. Very quickly, Liverpool fans thought, these two guys are not a force for good for this football club. Yeah. And Manchester United, even when times were good, their fans looked at what the Glazers were doing. I mean, football fans are very astute now, aren't they? Among the fan base, there are some financial experts who can spot what people are doing. And I do think, in credit to Manchester United fans, this is not some sort of Johnny-come-lately protest because times are hard and they look at Liverpool and Manchester City disappearing into the distance. I think they were, I'll be polite here, sceptical about how the Glazers were doing things from very early on, even when things were good on the pitch.
And the thing is, Daz, I mean, Manchester United have spent £800 million on players post Alex Ferguson going. Do you know they've only made a profit on one of those players, which was Daniel James, who they bought from Swansea and sold to Leeds. They bought 35 or more players, and they've lost money on all of them. The comedy being Paul Pogba, who they had in their youth team, let go, paid 89 million for, and then let him go again. Compare that to Liverpool. I mean, we've discussed, but I'd like to ask you this, Daz. How many bad buys have Liverpool made since Jurgen Klopp came in?
One or two. You can
maybe Karius, maybe.
Maybe Karius, but I don't think we didn't have a crystal ball up until the Champions League final. He was playing really well. I mean, he got us there as well. He was part of that team. So
I would probably disagree with you there, Daz, because I think a few of us felt he was very suspect. And I mean, this is a very minor issue, really. Time has moved on. Obviously, there was the damage he did in the Champions League final. Quite a few people were not convinced by him. They felt that Mignolet was just the most solid individual. But that sort of gets away from the point. The fact is that Liverpool signings in recent times, you could say Naby Keita hasn't lived up to what people were expected of him. But you look at others like Andy Robertson, £8 million. The big signings were game changers, weren't they? The Alisson and Virgil van Dijk. And recently we've seen Diogo Jota come in from Wolves, fantastic success. Luis Diaz arrived and again has been sensational. And Darwin Núñez, early days, I mean, what he was thinking the other night, we could do an hour on that. But that is, it's his lesson learned very early on, isn't it? And the other point about Liverpool's transfer dealings is, and this is interesting working in the media, now when Liverpool are linked with players, they sign them. There's no Frankie de Jong. I mean, people have grown old since Manchester United were first linked with Frankie de Jong, and he's still no keener on signing for them today than he was on the first day they were linked with him. Liverpool, Thiago, Diaz, Jota, Núñez, people like that, they're linked, and it only really gets out when the deal is done. And Diaz was a great example of that, because Tottenham were trying to get a deal done for him over many weeks, and everyone thought that's where he was going. Liverpool, bang, within a day, he'd gone. And that's how Liverpool do their business. Manchester United are linked with Casemiro today. Yeah. He's a very good player, but seems completely at left field of the sort of player they were initially thinking of signing. And, Jim has been critical of their transfer strategy, and that's because he's got no choice other than to be critical of it. There seems to be no structure. They're shooting around in the dark. I mean, Marko Arnautovic appeared the other week. Yeah. And I mean, that's laughable. The slightly other side of it is that it appeared that Ten Hag wanted him. And then because the fans kicked off, they decided they didn't want him. So you've got this very odd dynamic where the manager wants a signing and everyone just raises their hands. And then suddenly, because some of the fans kick off about it, they drop the idea like a hot coal. So there just doesn't seem to be any sort of strategy or plan with Manchester United. Whereas Liverpool, it's certainly in recent years, you could see exactly what they've done. Sadio Mane going out the door, you knew that pretty much the day after the Champions League final. He goes out of one door, Darwin Núñez comes in out in the other. Manchester United were linked with Núñez, but as soon as Liverpool appeared on the scene, forget it. You signed for Liverpool. And it just epitomises for me the way the two teams are run: efficiency and structure at Anfield, inefficiency, lack of strategy at Old Trafford, and you see the evidence on the pitch.
Well,
the interesting thing is, during the course of studying the rivalry, is that at the moment, Manchester United fans and probably some of the people involved in the club look at Liverpool and think, we've got to be more like Liverpool. We've got to be more like Liverpool. We've got to get this professionalism into our recruitment. We've got to get this sorted out. We've got to get stability. We've got to get all those things. And it was in the reverse back in the times when United were in the ascendant. They didn't want to copy what United were doing, but they felt we've got to be a bit more like that. We've got to get ourselves organised in that manner.
Yep.
And the other, sorry, Steve, yeah, go on.
No, I was just going to interject that even today, there's a big segment of Liverpool supporters who are biased against FSG because of the Glazers and how they've run their business, just because they're Americans, right? And they're not even comparable in the way that the Glazers use the club as for their own benefit. They're on the payroll. They saddled the club with debt. They use that money to invest in other things. But it's hard to try to tell people this. They're like, you don't want to be like that, especially before, when we're trying to chase trophies and win the league. People are ready to put the club in debt. They're ready to sell out to whichever oil consortium wanted to be part of the club. I said, you got to have your soul intact, And so it's always a running dialogue I have with a certain segment of people.
That goes back to when Klopp was appointed at Liverpool. Manchester United, an analogy I've mentioned to Jim a few times, is 2 years ago, Carlo Ancelotti, Jurgen Klopp, and Pep Guardiola were all managing within 35 miles of each other. None of them were at Manchester United. It's amazing. They somehow missed all of those managers. And Klopp is the one they must surely regret. Well, Guardiola, I'm sure all those three, they would have been great managers for Manchester United. But Klopp was, when they wanted him, when he was at Dortmund, there was the famous story about Ed Woodward speaking to him and relayed a comment made by apparently a Japanese visitor to Old Trafford, who said, this is like Disneyland for adults. And the story goes that put Klopp off, because Klopp wanted authenticity and was being sold fantasy. So in Liverpool's good fortune, if you like, he decided to stay where he was. All the cards fell into place when he was having his sabbatical. Liverpool probably spotted he was having a few months off, which hastened Brendan's departure. But again, Manchester United they just picked the wrong managers. Their sales pitch, they tried to get all of those managers and never got them. Liverpool went to Klopp, and that was done very quickly. United somehow managed to miss Klopp, Ancelotti, Guardiola, and again, FSG saw that Klopp was the man they felt could revive Liverpool, and went out and got him. And yes, they've had their missteps, the £77 for the season tickets, the trying to trademark the name of Liverpool, obviously the involvement with the Super League. But apart from that, Liverpool is a very, very well-run club with the right appointments in the right jobs, which have all come together to put them where they are now.
And the last manager that Manchester United missed was last November, when after Liverpool had won 5-0 at Old Trafford, it was clear that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was coming to the end of his time. Antonio Conte was available, but really, really tellingly, United's board did go for Antonio Conte because they knew he'd cause trouble. They knew he'd be a bit of a tough customer, and they didn't want it. So their complacency meant that Antonio Conte went to Tottenham instead. And you can see Antonio Conte is transforming Tottenham. Tottenham are in a very strong position now to be able to apply all that money, all that wealth that is coming through their new stadium onto the pitch under a manager who's going to challenge. And United yet again complacently missed out. And the difference, I mean, I'm fascinated in how the Glazers and FSG are regarded in America for their sporting franchises. Do people in Tampa appreciate? I know they won the Super Bowl, didn't they, a couple of years ago? I'm not quite sure how that happened, but how are they regarded, Steve? Can you just tell us that?
Well, I know that for the FSG crowd that followed the Boston Red Sox, that they had a similar history, right, where they went for decades without winning a title, and then the John Henry and his group came in and they won 4 World Series in 10 years. So I mean, they're heroes in Boston. And for us here in the United States that are supporters of Liverpool, we see the same thing. I live in Texas, so I know about Hicks and Gillette. They owned the Texas Rangers before, and they did the same thing with that team. They just used it as a coin purse for their own personal ambitions, without any regard to history or the community around the stadium, in Liverpool. So, but for the American Manchester United fan, the fans that I know, they don't really equate Glazers and Manchester United. They just see Manchester United, as the club, and whatever it takes to get to the end result, I think it doesn't really matter to them. And because I don't feel that there's a connection, the social aspect of Manchester United as there is with Liverpool, in a historical context. I just never have gotten that from that fan base where they're worried about history, and how it's perceived within the community. I think it's just a trophy and a results oriented thing, and they just take the good with the bad. Where when I look at Liverpool, I want the good and the good. I don't really want any of the bad. So it's a different mindset there.
Well, it seems a circus. It seems to be a bit of a circus at United. I mean, the whole Ronaldo saga just keeps going on. Out today, he's going to let everyone know in 2 weeks what's going on. Like that's mind blowing. I mean, if you want to be there, just say it. The fans.
Well, Gary Neville has said that, hasn't he? Yeah. Gary Neville has basically said, "Don't keep people waiting 2 weeks. Yeah. Come out and say it now." And it is symptomatic of what seems to have surrounded the club for a long time. But you would have thought with a new manager coming in, a very highly rated manager at Ajax, they would have had something ready to go. The scouting system would have had players to present to him, and yet he seems to be having to sort of go on the old fallback of players he knows personally and has dealt with personally. Casemiro just seems to have come out of the blue. I don't know what Jim's view on Casemiro is, but to me, and he's a very fine player. We saw that in the Champions League last season. But it almost seems to have been, it's like, well, who can we get now? Who can we get now? And there's no doubt they will have to present Casemiro with a massive wedge of money to tempt him out of Real Madrid. And there's the old thing that always used to apply to these clubs, and Bayern Munich was another one. Beware of Bayern Munich and Real Madrid bearing gifts, because Manchester United had it with Schweinsteiger, didn't they? And really, and I think Jim agrees with me on this. But when Schweinsteiger was leaving Bayern Munich, the first question Manchester United should have asked themselves was, why is he leaving Bayern Munich? Mm-hmm. And he got to Manchester United, fantastic player in his day, but he was finished. And Casemiro is not finished. But that is going to set them back an awful lot of money. And he's just suddenly appeared from nowhere. It's like someone who's linked with them for a few weeks. It's just come out of nowhere. So while I don't doubt Casemiro as a player, I'm just slightly suspicious and skeptical of how they've got to him.
I wanted, speaking about players that they're trying to get, I want to kind of go back to the book and on what role has players in the past added to this rivalry, right? Obviously you have Ince and Owen who played for both teams, and Beardsley did. So and you kind of see the rhetoric that the players are like, we hate Liverpool, even though they're from Spain, right? They probably don't know anything about Liverpool. So what role have they played over the years to really create this and intensify the rivalry?
It was fascinating, Steve, when we spoke to players about it, was how intense the rivalry was on the pitch. In the 1970s and 80s, it was Manchester United trying to prove themselves. It was, if we could beat Liverpool, it'll prove that we're a great side. And it was warfare on the pitch. I mean, just absolute kicking each other to pieces. And Mark Lawrenson told us that, there were times when they were playing United, the ref would blow the whistle after 20 minutes and say, guys, can we have a football match here? And I think that the players, and definitely in the noughties and 90s with the class of 92 at United, they identified themselves as anti-Liverpool. And that fed through into the England setup that the Liverpool and United players never really got on. And Gary Neville absolutely admitted to us that, how could we play with them midweek when we were going to kick lumps out of each other on the following Sunday? And, it was definitely a rivalry, although Danny Murphy said to us he wasn't sure it was a Manchester United Liverpool thing, because he always got on very well with Paul Scholes and Nicky Butt and so on. He thought it was just that all the Liverpool players hated Gary Neville.
One of the examples of the rivalry to me and what it means, and again, we've looked at this in the book, is Michael Owen. Michael Owen, who should be a legend without anybody questioning it at Liverpool for what he did for the club. I mean, there were questions asked when he left in 2004, and then they won the Champions League without him. But in my mind, there is no doubt Michael Owen's status and standing among quite a few Liverpool fans has been impacted by the fact that he played for Manchester United. Of course. He didn't go there directly. He went circuitous route via Newcastle, Real Madrid, Newcastle. Then he went to United. But even now, and I would say the majority of the Liverpool fans accept what Michael Owen did for the club, what a brilliant player he was for Liverpool, and how he won the 2001 FA Cup final pretty much off the end of his own boot type of thing. But there is quite a few Liverpool fans who can't quite see Michael in the same way again because he played for Manchester United. And I think that is sad personally, as a sort of a neutralish observer, because I think I saw Michael, fantastic player for Liverpool. We can argue about the merits of him moving to Real, whatever. But there's no doubt in my mind the fact that he pulled on that shirt and Liverpool fans saw him scoring a winning goal in a Manchester derby and celebrating like mad. Among certain fans, that has definitely affected his status. And that, to me, hints at how deep this rivalry goes between Liverpool and Manchester United.
And Steve, you ask, how does the playing side define the rivalry? Well, the last player to move directly between Liverpool and Manchester United was Phil Chisnell in 1965. Since then, more than a dozen players have moved directly between Real Madrid and Barcelona. 5 or 6 players have moved directly from Rangers to Celtic. No one has moved between Manchester United and Liverpool directly. There have been a couple of people who've done sort of, as Phil said, via other places. And back in 2005, I think it was, Gabriel Heinze tried to move directly to Liverpool from Manchester United. He was out. He was Liverpool. He was alerted Liverpool that he wanted to go there. Liverpool were prepared to meet his buyout clause in his contract, and United United refused to sell him. Alex Ferguson said he could go anywhere but to that lot, and that was a really defining moment. And when Heinze took United to arbitration, the FA found some very small minor clause in his contract that said he could be bought out. His buyout clause was in euros rather than pounds. United clung to that, said, obviously we meant that he couldn't go to another English club, particularly not Liverpool. So it's there, between the players, it's there. 5-0 last year, I was standing on the Stretford end watching the players as they came off the pitch, and the United fans who were left in the Stretford end were giving the Liverpool players as they came off the pitch absolute verbals. And Trent Alexander-Arnold was amongst them and gleefully conducting the United abuse. He was loving it. And I think that still there is that on the pitch. It means a lot to the players.
It's funny because you referenced that, not very many players are gone directly from team to team. And I was thinking, even Inter and AC Milan, they go back and forth. But I guess it's easier when you share the same stadium. You just kind of move.
Yeah, don't even have to move house, do you? we spoke to John Scales as part of our chapter on the 1996 FA Cup final, the white suits business, and he said he was so disillusioned with how things were going at Liverpool. He went in to see the management team and expressed his dissatisfaction. And I said, "Well, what happened then?" He said, "Well, I was sold." And he said, once realizing that his Liverpool career was over, he then tried to engineer a move directly from Liverpool to Manchester United. He said his people were ordered to contact Ferguson and United's management team to see if he could move directly from Liverpool to Manchester United. Manchester United didn't pursue it because they moved in another direction. We said to John, "Would you really have done that? Would you have done it?" He said, "Oh yeah." He said, "I would have done it." He said, "Because I'm not the local hero. It's not Robbie Fowler moving from Liverpool to Manchester United." He said, "They would have got over me going there in a few weeks." Now, whether that is true or not, I don't know. They wouldn't have got over it by the time he came back to Anfield if he was wearing a Manchester United shirt. But he said he would have done it, but he understood why, people like Robbie Fowler would, hell would freeze over before Robbie Fowler would think of playing for Manchester United. But he would have considered it, and he in the book he tells the story in more detail than I've told you now. But it's quite interesting that he was prepared to do it, but in the end, circumstances dictated that he didn't.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this for my South American friends. You talk about fierce rivalry. Obviously, River and Boca are one of the fiercest rivalries in the world. But they seem to take it to another extreme where it ends up being violent at the end of the day, whenever they meet. And there's always has to be police precautions. And I'm just wondering how, the safeguards or just the mentality of the people on the ground between those Manchester United and Liverpool that's, hey, we're rivalries, but we don't go to that extent. Or has it changed?
I think now, I think the way stadiums are policed, and the fact that it's all-seater and stuff like that, you don't particularly get that type of thing. There's obviously animosity between the fans, but like last season when Jim mentioned the 5-0 game, Liverpool fans were kept behind for 20 minutes. It's probably some of the happiest 20 minutes of their lives. They were able to sit in Old Trafford taunting the Manchester United players and fans and stuff like that. But again, in the book, we go into this, the violence that did exist at times, and Daz may well sort of go back far enough to remember it. And the one we particularly explored was the 1985 FA Cup semi-final at Goodison. There'd been a rough time in 1979 when there was a semi-final. First, it was 2-2, I think, at Main Road. Then United won 1-0 at Goodison. The one in 85, there was a lot going on there. And I was actually working as a news reporter on the Liverpool Daily Post at the time. And on the Monday, Merseyside Police called a press conference and laid out what they called the armoury and the weaponry of hooliganism that was used at Goodison on the Saturday. And among that were golf balls with nails knocked into them that were being thrown, and other stuff that you wouldn't believe people would get into a football match. I think that was probably, I was going to say the height of it, but the nadir is probably a better word to describe it. We then obviously had Heysel and Hillsborough and all that followed on from that. But certainly from the early 70s up to the mid 80s, and Daz can either correct me if I'm wrong or flesh it out himself, there was definitely an air of menace when you went to those games. Not like that now. It's there you get the chanting and the and the animosity and the obvious rivalry, but it's not as bad as it was then.
I got chased back to the railway station in Manchester, and it's a crazy story. 16, balls to the wall, doing all this to United fans. But that's the first time I actually was in the midst of violence. I had a brick thrown at me and knocked one of my front teeth out, 16 stitches. Like,
whoa.
Yeah. I had never seen that before. I mean, I'd had my mates tell me about it, just be careful. And, I got home and my dad just looked at me and then slapped me on the head and was just like, I hope you didn't cause it. And I was like,
yeah, that sounds about.
I was like, I'm bleeding all here, and you just on the head.
Well, one of the things we look at in the book, and there's a very good photograph of it, is that the problems ran so deep with behaviour that one year, poor old Bob Paisley was somehow persuaded to travel into Anfield on the Manchester United team coach, sitting by the window, and he was effectively, poor Bob was a human shield for the hooligans. So if Bob's sitting by the window, they won't throw bricks at him. And it worked. And there's this funny picture of Bob sitting by the window and a smiling Alex Ferguson and Brian Robson sitting at a safe distance away from all the trouble, type of thing. It is quite a funny photograph.
That's
sorry, Steve. It was a funny thing. We did an event in Liverpool to promote the book the other day, and one of the guys that we spoke to in the book was one of the leading hooligans of the Liverpool section, and another guy we speak to in the book was a big what was termed casual for Manchester United, and the two of them, now well into their 50s, were sitting next to each other in the audience at the event, and then went off for a drink together. The oddity about this rivalry that we discovered when we were doing it is, at the heart of it, there's a respect. Deep down there's a respect, and it's interesting what Daz was saying. He doesn't want Man United to go down. Yeah, he'd have a laugh. Yeah, he would. But ultimately, no, he doesn't want them to go down.
You might miss and that's what he's saying.
He'd miss him. And what defines United and Liverpool is a deep antagonism, a deep loathing, but ultimately a respect, because they know what it takes to win the league. Mm-hmm. And the other lot have done it almost as many times as them. They know what it takes to win the European Cup, and the other lot have done it almost as much as them. So there's a respect there. It's an odd one, yes, on Monday, the Liverpool fans online, social media will taunt them. They'll laugh, they'll mock at how far the mighty United have fallen, but ultimately they admire them.
Yeah, I was just going to say
that. I think the feeling is mutual, highlighted by what Gary Neville said, when he said, no matter how far ahead Manchester United were of Liverpool, even though Liverpool were always in contention for something, weren't they? They weren't in contention for the title, they were in contention for cups. But he said, it certainly in general, no matter how far ahead of Liverpool Manchester United were, that phrase Jim used, which is repeating what Gary said to us, glance in that rear view mirror, and it was always, where are Liverpool and what are they doing?
Well, I have the utmost respect for Ferguson. I think it's a generational thing as well. I'm a 70s child as well. So for me, I'm not just a Liverpool supporter, I'm a football supporter as well. And what Ferguson did for United, I have the utmost respect for him. While I think some of the newer Liverpool fans will be just like, I hate him, but not understand what he's done for football and for Man United.
And he did it at Aberdeen, didn't he, as well? I mean, he did an incredible job at Aberdeen. And again, this comes out in the book where he always liked to have an identifiable enemy, Ferguson. And when he was in Aberdeen, it was the old firm at Rangers and Celtic who he talked about, they get all favours from the media, the referees prefer them to us. all the same tricks he used when he got down to England, and immediately identified Liverpool as that enemy that he always liked to have. But also he knew how good Liverpool were. And if Manchester United were to be as successful as he wanted them to be, the team and the club they had to somehow overtake was Liverpool. And it took him a few years, but he did it.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that when expats come over to the United States and they go to a sporting event and they see, you know, the rival sitting next to you with their kid on, and you're supporting the team with one kid on, it's such a foreign concept to them. I just laugh. I'm like, yeah, you're not getting this anywhere else. And I'm not going to say there's no violence that ever occurs at those kind of things, but you know, it's just,
it is strange. Like the first year I was over here, walking into a pub, and you see United fans on one side and Liverpool fans on another, and you're just like, what is going on? It never happened back
you're a stranger to that sort of thing.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, the American passion for football is there. You know, that you have some people, especially back home, they question, well, he's American, so obviously he doesn't know about football. But like Steve knows about football. These American fans know about football. You know, what they want to do, and same with United, they want to read these books on the history, and I love that, because
we saw it to an extent when Jesse Marsch was appointed at Leeds United, and immediately the cracks about Ted Lasso came. And this is a guy who's managed at Leipzig, at Salzburg, had taken his team to the Champions League and performed with great credit, including a game at Anfield, which is a very good game. Was it 4-3 or something like that? And instead of saying, oh, this will be interesting, Bob Bradley had it when he was at Swansea. Bob Bradley didn't do as well at Swansea, unfortunately. But you just felt that there was that element of cheap cracks about them. Or what did these Yanks know about football? When these guys are respected football people. You know, Jesse Marsch was following a legend at Leeds in Bielsa, but he kept them up, and you know, he's an interesting guy who's had a good career. But there is definitely that element of what do Americans know about it, and it's quite an arrogant attitude, in my opinion, because you know, why shouldn't Americans know about football? You know, people shouldn't have this very patronising, arrogant attitude, and I noticed it. I think that Ted Lasso didn't do Jesse Marsch any favours, because immediately when he lost the game, oh, Ted Lasso, you know. But it's, as I say, I mean, judging from what you've said and from what Steven said, you know, the passion is there. Certainly, as you say, Liverpool are now the biggest club in America. When Tim Howard was at Everton, Everton were cashing in on the American market then. And so, yeah, I can imagine the pubs being full. Find it quite a stretch to see them all sitting side by side, but if you tell me that's what happens, I believe you.
Oh, no, not anymore.
Not at the pub, not at our pub, but I'm just saying at the sporting events itself, at live events.
All right, I see.
They're interspersed, right? And which you wouldn't find in England Premier League. So, but
no.
Everyone over there now pretty much has their own pub, so it's basically back home, but with just American.
It's getting like England then.
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to quickly touch base on like what's rearing its ugly head again. I'm thinking probably both know what I'm talking about, is these chants. It's always been there, but it just seems in the last 2-3 seasons it's getting worse.
Are you talking about the sort of the Munich, Hillsborough type of thing? And Shankly was one of the early ones, wasn't it? I mean, Shankly was the response to the Munich chants, wasn't it? I actually think it's got a lot better, but unfortunately, there is always the minority who will pipe up, mocking Liverpool fans about Hillsborough and behaviour there, which is completely untrue. And then there'll be Liverpool fans will fire back about Munich. I don't think it's as bad as it was, and I mean, maybe Jim can shed a different light on it, but I know what you mean. And we saw it again the other night with the guy from Crystal Palace who, he did nothing wrong other than bit of argy-bargy with Nunez.
Wind up,
and the next thing, he's reporting 300 or 400 abusive messages, including death. I mean, social media can be a right cesspit sometimes for stuff like that. But so there'll always be a minority. But I think in large number, fans are respectful. We saw it when the Liverpool fans applauded in the 7th minute at Anfield, when Ronaldo, that sad event with his child, and the Liverpool fans all applauded in the 7th minute. Very respectful, the whole ground. It was very wonderfully observed, which Ronaldo acknowledged himself. And then once that was done, it was back to business, if you like. But I don't know what Jim's feeling on it is, but you do hear the chants. But I do think most people who go to the games are reasonably civilized in that respect.
I think you do hear the chants. I mean, I think that there's kind of within the ground. I think it's probably not something that you hear, because I think people would hush each other, but you definitely hear it in the pub beforehand. You'd hear it on the concourses. It's an embarrassment, and it's pretty shameful. I mean, I know United fans who feel embarrassed about what they used to chant now. Feel embarrassed about Shankly 81 chants that they used to give. And I know Liverpool fans who feel embarrassed that they chanted about Munich. I really hope it doesn't come back, because it's not on. I mean, United fans will chant stuff about "In Your Liverpool Home," those songs. Peter Hooton, interestingly, when we were speaking to him the other day, the Spirit of Shankly guy, he was saying he found it a difference between United and Liverpool, in that Liverpool fans will give it plenty when they're playing United, but they don't mention the club other games. And he said he felt that he could hear the United fans singing about Liverpool when they were playing Crystal Palace or when they were playing Brentford. And he felt that was a difference between the two. And he's not wrong. They will sing about Liverpool in other circumstances. I'm not quite sure why or what that is about, but it certainly happens. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to see it just phase out of football. You can say your nasty words to each other and all that, and the banter's great. But when it starts doing that, it just stems, I think, from lack of knowledge from some people. Again, the younger generation watch a 60-year-old man start singing that, they're going to go with it.
Yeah,
because
one of the guys who we did a Q&A at the end of the other night, and there was quite a very respectful guy on the front row, and he was asking about this sort of thing, wasn't he, Jim? The feeling between the fans and the chants. We spoke to him afterwards, and he said, I have to admit, he said that when I was younger, I chanted Munich songs at Manchester United. He said, I look back now and think, what the hell was I doing? And it's obviously quite thinking about it, it's had quite an impact on him, because the question he asked was framed around that. And he looks back and thinks, why on earth did I do it? And as you say, you don't want these guys age 60 setting such a terrible example to the younger fans who are going along and giving them the sort of history lesson they don't need to get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been in the pub before, and I've heard a Liverpool supporter start to sing it, and you just go up to them and just tug the shirt and be like,
yeah, don't do it. Yeah,
it's just not right. But I guess we're coming to the close. I know I've really enjoyed it. I know Steve has as well, and again,
it's been great.
Can't wait to read the book. It's just, I'm looking forward to Monday. I don't know, Jim, are you looking forward to Monday?
Sorry, the line broke there, mate. Sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
I'll say it again then.
Until you hear it, you'll keep saying it.
all I'll say is, Daz, if United win on Monday, they'll be ahead of Liverpool in the league.
I know.
The sound you just heard was that of a man clutching at straws.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because we talked about the Premier League and the rivalry with Manchester City. And coming away from Anfield, I was at Anfield on Monday night. We're coming away. And so many fans were discussing already after 2 games, they're 4 points ahead of us. They're 4 points. And that reflects on how high the bar has been set by Liverpool and Manchester City. That now a draw is treated like a loss, isn't it? You know, the fans almost felt like they lost the other night, and we're 2 games into the season. So I think there's actually, bizarrely and almost ridiculously as it sounds, there's quite a lot riding on Monday's game. Liverpool need to get themselves going a bit, don't they, and win that game. And United have somehow got to show more than they've shown so far this season, which is effectively nothing. I mean, I still think that the sort of team Liverpool will put out, irrespective of injuries and the stuttering start to the season, I think that the team that will, I'm not expecting 5-0, but I think Liverpool will win. But this is a real opportunity for United, if they can somehow galvanise themselves, and even if they got a creditable draw, to at least get the season going and give their fans some optimism that they haven't had so far. My personal opinion is I think Liverpool will win, maybe not by a big margin, but I think they'll win. But it's a great opportunity for United as well. And 3rd game of the season, you're actually going into it with quite a lot hinging on it for both sides, which is great, but also a sign of just how far and how high that bar has been raised by Liverpool and Manchester City.
Well, it can kickstart both of the club's seasons, really.
Absolutely.
And you know, as the old cliche, form goes out the window.
But does you say that, and it normally does, but last season Manchester United just gave nothing, and that really hurt their fans, both at Old Trafford and at Anfield. They just didn't live up to the rivalry. They didn't give anything, and it's the same players. You know, United have got the same players, so I'm not quite sure how they're going to be more resolute on Monday night. I'm not quite sure how they're going to stand up. I mean, Ten Hag's had a whole week with them on the training ground. Maybe he'll come up with something, but I'm not sure.
I hope not. Yeah, I never.
On that optimistic note,
I've never predicted a football result, and I never will. But in the back of my mind, there's still that little, like, you know, the way we've played in the last 2 matches. The Palace match was much better than the Fulham match. The Fulham match, we just didn't really show up. The Palace match, I thought we played really well. And I thought if we had 11, if Nunes hadn't got sent off, I think we would have beaten Palace. So
I think Liverpool played well either side of, sort of, for the first half hour. Then after Palace scored, Liverpool played well. They just weren't. Apologies if you lost me for a minute there, by the way. They just weren't clinical enough in the first half. They had chances, didn't take them. But also, I thought Palace were decent as well. You know, they're not. They were a very dangerous side on the break, and that's how they punished Liverpool. I didn't see the Fulham game because I was driving up. I was covering Everton versus Chelsea that day, but I saw it. It sounded like Fulham played very well as well, but you know, Liverpool, they'll get themselves going. There's too many good players for them not to. So it's I'm really looking forward to Monday night on a variety of levels, really, just to see how it all goes.
Me as well. Well, gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate you taking an hour out of your time, and hopefully we didn't piss Jim off.
No, his behaviour was much better here than his shameful showing on Irish radio earlier, which I fear may go viral if they use that. No, he's very civilised, but it's been great to speak to you both. And obviously, if there's anything else during the course of the season, by all means, get in touch. It'd be great to speak to you again.
That's all very much.
Yeah, we just want to remind our subscribers and listeners that to go order the book. It's called Red on Red, Liverpool, Manchester United, and the fiercest rivalry in world football. So I can't wait to get my copy. I know Daz is looking forward to reading it. So we really appreciate you guys coming
reading
on.
your copy, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Looking forward to reading yours.
Surely a copy.
I'll sign it. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.